we will be discussing the serious consequences of drug dependency, domestic violence, neglect, and the negative impact this triad has on children. There are other helpful resources at www.teenadew.co.uk. Visit our YouTube channel, Teen Dew, for information and other videos related to the issue of serious drug dependency, domestic violence, and neglect. In this video, we will attempt to answer one related question. For the sake of the child, should there be a time limit for parents to wean themselves off the harmful substances such as drugs? Let us lay the foundation of this discussion by saying this. Drug addiction is a complex disease, and quitting takes more than good intentions or a strong will. Drugs change the brain in ways that foster compulsive drug abuse. Quitting is difficult. Although it can be treated, the duration and success of treatment varies from person to person, and it depends on many factors including the addict's willingness to engage with treatment, environmental factors, and motivation for change. However, even when the treatment is successful, there is always the danger of relapsing into drug abuse. Let's look closely at what it does to the addict. In 2007, the medical journal The Lancet commissioned a number of drug experts to assess how potentially addictive the most popular illegal drugs are. The results, in order of addictiveness, with the most addictive being mentioned first, were as follows: heroin, cocaine, tranquilizers, amphetamines, ketamine, cannabis, hallucinogens, ecstasy. Research on the NHS website Inform has also concluded that each drug causes harm to the user, and they can be summarized as follows. Cannabis. The psychological problems associated with cannabis use includes dizziness and sickness, dry mouth, dry lips and tongue, panic and paranoia or a suspicion of people and situations, feeling hungry, loss of coordination. The long-term results of using cannabis regularly include lung disease and cancer, respiratory problems such as bronchitis and asthma, mental health conditions such as depression and schizophrenia. There could be problems with hypertension and infertility. Amphetamine. Amphetamine use can lead to short-term dizziness, hallucinations, burst blood vessels that, in very rare cases, can lead to paralysis, muscle weakness, and may be fatal, insomnia, and depression. Let's look at cocaine and crack. Cocaine raises blood pressure, causes the heart to beat irregularly, and increases body temperature. As well as causing heart failure when taken in large doses, the long-term use of cocaine can lead to depression, insomnia, extreme paranoia, extreme weight loss and malnutrition, impotence in men, and serious damage to the nasal passages. Because cocaine is so addictive, users experience withdrawal symptoms such as intense irritability and restlessness if they go for longer than usual without taking it. This period of time becomes shorter and shorter as the body becomes more tolerant to the drug, and larger quantities are required to experience a high. As the effects of the drug wear off, users will usually get symptoms such as exhaustion and depression. Women who use cocaine while pregnant put the health of their baby at serious risk because the drug can cause low birth weight and birth defects. The baby may also be born addicted to cocaine. Ecstasy. Very few ecstasy tablets are pure ecstasy. Most contain other substances, such as talcum powder, Some ecstasy tablets have even been found to contain dog-worming medicine. More dangerous substances, including anesthetics and tranquilizers, such as ketamine, may also be added to ecstasy tablets. Dehydration is a major risk when taking ecstasy. Ecstasy raises the addict's body temperature, and the amphetamine contained in each tablet encourages the user to behave energetically for long periods of time, for example by dancing in a club all night. If the addict's fluid levels drop dramatically, dehydration can cause unconsciousness, coma, and even death. If the addict takes large amounts of ecstasy, the addict may experience feelings of anxiety, panic, and confusion, and it can also be difficult for other people to calm the addict down. Other unpleasant side effects include dry mouth, nausea, raised blood pressure, and depression. Some users say their body stiffens after taking ecstasy, often causing them to clench their jaw and grind their teeth. Another common symptom is an increased heart rate, which can feel like the addict's heart is pounding or hammering inside his or her chest. Tranquilizers. Many tranquilizers are addictive if they are used regularly. Tranquilizers are physically addictive, so the user may have withdrawal symptoms if the supply is stopped suddenly. Tranquilizer withdrawal symptoms can include severe headache, nausea, anxiety, and confusion. Solvents. Many solvents contain chemicals that have a toxic effect on the body, particularly the heart. Every time the user sniffs a solvent, he or she is at risk of having a heart attack, which may be fatal. In the UK, there are an average of 50 deaths a year from solvent abuse. Other adverse effects of solvent abuse include vomiting, blackouts, and in the case of long-term use, liver, kidney, and brain damage. Magic mushrooms. Magic mushrooms are hallucinogens. They are very unpredictable, and it is possible to have a bad trip, even if all the addict's previous trips have been enjoyable. A bad trip can feel like being trapped in a nightmare. There is a risk that somebody may act irrationally or impulsively during a trip and place themselves in physical danger, for example, by suddenly running into a busy road. With magic mushrooms, there is a risk that the addict or the supplier may mistake poisonous mushrooms for magic mushrooms. Mushroom poisoning can be very serious and is often fatal. Heroin. Most heroin is bought on the street and is only 10 to 60% pure. It is usually mixed with other substances to increase the quantity and to make it more profitable. Because it is impossible to know how pure heroin is, it is easy for the user to take an overdose. Overdosing on heroin can cause heart failure, unconsciousness, and coma. There is also a risk that the user will choke on their own vomit if they are sick while unconscious. Injecting heroin has additional risks. Sharing needles increases the risk of contracting serious diseases, such as hepatitis C and HIV. Long-term injecting may also cause damage to veins, serious infections, such as abscesses, pus-filled swellings, and severe constipation. The wider impact of drug misuse is something we should now consider. As well as the impact on the addict's health, drug misuse can have a negative effect on the user's quality of life and relationships with others. Many drug abusers find that they lose touch with their family and friends, or that their family and friends lose patience with them due to their unreasonable behaviour. Hobbies, interests, and ambitions can be forgotten as drugs become more and more important. It can be increasingly difficult to hold down a job if the user has a drug problem. People with serious drug addiction, such as heroin, cocaine, or crack addiction, often resort to desperate, illegal, and dangerous activities to find money to pay for their drugs. Examples include begging, burglary, shoplifting, street crime, such as mugging or bag snatching, and other criminal activities. Now let's explore the first question. For the sake of the child, should there be a time limit for parents to wean themselves off the harmful substances? The answer will differ or depend on whether you look at it from the child's perspective or you look at it through the lenses of the person in the throes of serious drug addiction. The answer to this question will also depend on the addict's willingness to engage with treatment. This will often be evidenced by the engagement with the prescription and an honest and openness with professionals. It would also depend on environmental factors such as the addict's associates, friends, and the locality where the addict lives. A change in any or all of these environmental factors has been found to help recovery. Motivation for change is perhaps the most important ingredient when making the change. For some families, contact with the child and the addict at the early stages can be strong motivation for change. The effect of drug addiction on an individual varies, depending on the type of drug and the level of addiction. We already discussed the spectrum of behaviour that can be associated with the disease called drug addiction. Within this spectrum, there are two categories. There is the functioning addict, and the other is the compulsive addict. The functioning addict is the person who, although in the throes of addiction, may still hold down a job, appear in public without any physical sign of addiction. This includes the person who has seasonal or periodic pull, and once this strong urge is satisfied, sometimes over a weekend or longer duration, the person can usually return to normal functioning after a short period in isolation, feeding the addiction. A compulsive addict is a person who, for the most part, is unable to function for any reasonable period of time without feeding the addiction. The impact on the sufferer can present with emotional detachment from his or her child and family members, self-centeredness, tendency towards outburst of anger or rage towards his or her child, and isolation from others. It is very common for the needs of the child to be neglected or not being able to consistently meet the child's needs. A child is at the most vulnerable point when he or she has just been born, and this vulnerability should progressively reduce as the child grows. But the vulnerability of a child living with parents with entrenched drug addiction will, generally speaking, remains consistently at a high level. Please read our article on vulnerability for a full detail of this point, or watch our video on the same topic. Every case must be examined on its own facts, and every child's circumstances are different. However, every child is entitled to be brought up in a safe environment, and where possible by birth parents. But where this is not possible, then alternative permanent carers should be sought for the child. In making this decision, sometimes the court has to balance protecting the child from significant harm, what's in the best interest of the child, and the child's timescales within an alternative carer can be sought against the timescales of parents to wean themselves off their addiction, and can be capable of providing good enough parenting for their child. In the case of MH, a child, 2014, EWC Civ 1396, 28th October 2014, the court had to balance the consideration of the child's timescales within an alternative carers must be sought, and the parents who are not able to care for this child. The facts of that case are summarised as follows. The child, S, was aged 6 years, 10 months old. She cannot be cared for by either of her parents, now or in the foreseeable future. She has been in foster care for more than 18 months. Her mother has long-standing issues with drug addiction and has been the victim of appalling domestic violence at the hands of her father and a subsequent partner, M. She is attempting to address the first with some good, if not complete, success. The second is dependent to large extent on her ability to separate completely from the perpetrators of violence. This is proving more difficult. She was driven to acknowledge the adverse impact upon S on both counts. The child lived with her mother until she was removed from her mother's care by a court order in April 2013. The mother would wish to resume the care of her child, but, however, reluctantly, concedes through her lawyer that this is a case where she was rightly ruled out as a viable option to parent her child. The mother sought to maintain the most generous contact regime possible with her daughter. Obviously, the more likely if S is placed with long-term foster parents than with adoptive parents. The relationship between mother and father was said to be at an end. The court concluded in this case that both parents were unable to provide the child with good enough parenting. In the case of Ree, a child, reported in 2010, EWCC from page 31. The judge was considering the issue of drug dependency. The judge found, as an unavoidable fact, that both the mother and the father were still within the grip of drug dependency. He went on to say, "I do not wish to be judgmental about this. Those who have not experienced drug or alcohol dependency should be slow to criticize others who have been less fortunate. The fact, however, remains that on their own accounts both the mother and the father are at risk of relapsing into the dark world of drugs misuse, and it is literally only the present level of subutex that prevents such a relapse. Sad to relate, they have proven unequal to the task of weaning themselves off the substitute despite a professed desire to do so. There has not been any reduction in their daily dosage. Furthermore, they are incapable or perhaps unwilling to reduce or end their drugs habit, despite the father, for example, acknowledging that it is inconsistent with proper childcare. The situation would be radically different in my judgment if they had been able to show that they were entirely free of drugs and had remained so for 6 or 12 months. But that is not the position. Children can suffer persistent neglect or physical abuse as a consequence of his or her parents' drug dependency and domestic violence. Take the case of the child who, within days of childbirth, tests results confirmed the presence in her mother of a mixture of heroin, cocaine, cannabis, and excessive alcohol. The mother may have sought medical help to wean her off the heroin and may have sought the help of child protection social workers. A relatively low dose of buprenorphine, known as Subutex, was prescribed by the doctor, but unknown to the doctor, the mother was supplementing the prescription with an unprescribed higher dosage obtained illegally and supplied by the father. When the daughter was born, she was suffering from fetal alcohol syndrome, caused by exposure to the mother's toxicity, commonly known as withdrawal symptoms. This condition will most likely negatively impact on the development of the child. This is further exacerbated by ongoing domestic violence between parents. The harmful effect of drugs are well documented, and it has been suggested that perhaps if controlled drugs are prescribed, then maybe the child is not exposed to significant harm because the parents are receiving treatment. This proposition may be true for some people, but it will depend on whether the person is engaging with services and is reducing his use of the controlled drugs. The fact is that the prescription of controlled drugs to assist those with drug addiction is equally dangerous. The danger of controlled drugs was explained in the case of General Medical Council versus Sathanathan, 2008, EWHC 872, admin. 28th of April 2008. The Primary Care Trust, PCT, commenced disciplinary proceedings against a doctor, and part of the case was that diazepam and temazepam prescriptions, if combined with methadone, heroin or morphine, could be lethal to the addict. Considerations in family proceedings as to whether a person can be weaned off serious drugs will generally include, but is not limited to, the expert reports regarding the drug use, length of period of use, willingness of the user to reduce illicit drug use, and the realistic chance or prospect of coming off serious illicit drug use within a child's timescale. 6 months before the time of birth and 6 months after the child's birth has been considered a significant marker in progressing from assessments to giving serious consideration to alternative carer for the child. In the case of Ree, a child, mentioned earlier in this video, the court took the view that based on the peculiarities of the case, that, and I quote, "The groundwork which the parents needed to undertake in order to achieve a different outcome was set out by the judge in the proceedings relating to their daughter. He told them that if they had been drug-free in the 6 to 12 months immediately before the hearing before him, that would have signalled a huge turnaround. However, on the facts of this case, relating to their son and therefore as regards their current drug taking, the parents have not yet done enough to demonstrate that they have turned their lives around. I cannot ignore the fact that the mother has been involved with CDAT for the last 5 years and that her prescription has reduced little over that period. I was not given similar details for the husband. He accepts his dependency on methadone is considerable still. Both parents remain outwardly casual about drug misuse and are still within the grip of drug dependency. We hope you have found this video useful. Please send your feedback to admin@teenadew.co.uk. Please subscribe to Teenadew on YouTube. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. This video is copyright to Teenadew Limited, August 2015.